Hi everyone, this is Tuplex. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Kovarex enrichment. In the last episode we got our nuclear power up and running, but we needed more uranium to keep the fuel going to the reactors fast enough to keep them running. So I've set a little something up here. I built this off camera just because I wasn't precisely sure yet how I was going to build it, so I wanted to build it and make sure it works before I explain it. So that's why you see it already sitting here. But it's fairly simple. Let's take a look at it. So in the Kovarex enrichment process, as we explained before, we take 40 of the uranium-235, which is what we need to make the fuel cells, and 5 of the uranium-238. And after 60 seconds, we get 41 uranium-235s and 2 uranium-238s. So essentially what that means, if you just look at the net output, we're taking 3 uranium-238s and converting them into 1 uranium-235, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, I guess we're not really converting, but that's kind of what the net effect is. You're turning 238 into 235 that you can use to make fuel, nuclear warheads, or whatever you want. Okay, so it takes a long time. You need at least 40 uranium-235 to start the process. So I waited a bit until I had 40, and actually I got enough to run all 3 of these machines at the same time. And I also put in productivity 3 modules. Okay, I've got 2 of those. So we're getting a 20% productivity bonus out of this, which gives us even more uranium. Now that productivity bonus means that when the bonus hits, if I'm not mistaken, when the bonus hits, we get 1 additional uranium. You don't get 41 additional. But we can watch it for a few minutes and confirm that that really is the case. I think the productivity will hit in the next 1 or 2 cycles on this machine. Okay, so we're getting 235 and 238 as our outputs. And what I want to do is I want to take all the 235 that comes out and I want to load it back into the machine, right? Because I need to keep that 40. I need to keep those 40 pieces of uranium in circulation, basically. So once you put them into this process, you can't really use them anymore. You need them to keep the process running. But every time it runs, you're going to get another piece of uranium that comes out. So it'll pay for itself fairly quickly. After 40 cycles, it pays for itself. So what I did is I put a stack filter inserter on one side, and I have that filtered for uranium-235. And that just drops it here on the ground. This inserter picks it up and puts it into a chest. And then from that chest, it goes back into the machine. Okay, and you can see that working here. Now you'll see that the bots are coming to try to get that uranium because I have a request for uranium-235 over here to make my fuel cells, but we'll get to that in a minute. But in any case, the inserters are faster than the bots, and that's a good thing right now because I don't want the bots to grab so much uranium from this process that I end up with fewer than 40, because then the process will stop. Okay, so the fact that the bots are not quite fast enough is a good thing. Now, as you all know, when we set up a process like this, the inserters will always try to insert enough material into the machine for 2 cycles. So as an example, we can see here, we need 10 iron plate for 1 production cycle, and the inserters load 20. Okay, so in this case, the inserters are going to try to load 80 uranium into this machine. So until we get to 80, none of the uranium is going to accumulate in this chest for us to use to make fuel. Okay, so now if you've got enough uranium just coming out of your normal uranium processing, then that might not be a problem. Right now I've got, I've got 110, right? So all the uranium-235 that's coming out of the normal process is going into these chests, and the bots are free to grab that and load that here so I can make more fuel cells. And because the uranium is precious, I've loaded this one with Productivity 3 modules too. Now this slows down the machine quite a bit, but honestly this is still plenty fast enough to keep up with my reactors, so I don't really care that this is slowed down. Now these have a minus 30% speed penalty because of the productivity modules. Each one carries a 15% speed penalty. And in this one, I kind of do care about it. I would prefer that these went a lot faster. So we'll see what we can do to speed those up. But in the meantime, this will continue just to feed the uranium back into the machine until we have at least 80. At that point, the extra uranium will collect into this chest, and then the bots will be free to come and grab it and use it to make fuel. And we'll keep making fuel until this chest is full, and then it'll stop. Okay, now the uranium 238 I have coming out the other side. Now in this case, I only get 2 from each cycle, so I'm just using a regular filter inserter. I'm not using a filter stack inserter, because the regular filter inserter is fast enough. Now in this case, it goes directly into a requester chest, which I set up to request 5 uranium. 5 uranium is what we need for 1 cycle. So I've got 5 in here. When this is ready, it'll take the 5 out, load it into the machine, and then when it's done, I'll have 5 in here that the bots will bring from these chests, and then when it's done, it'll stick 2 more in there. So in actuality, the bots will just bring 2 or 3 every time we get through a production cycle here. Okay, but that way I'm also recycling all the uranium 238 that comes out of here. All right, so I hope I've explained that well enough. If you have any questions, let me know, but it's fairly simple. Now, I've got 3 of these things running. Now, one thing you could do is, let's say that this has been running for a while. You don't have 80, you don't have enough to start to fill these chests yet, but you need more fuel. Well, one thing you could do is you could just come over to one of these machines that's running, and you could take out a few bits of uranium to make fuel with, right? You can use this stuff, but then it'll just take longer for it to build up. The other thing you could do, if you have multiple machines running, like I do, is we could focus and try to load up one machine first. So like we could take these 24 out, these 24 out. We could put those in this chest. Okay, and now this one's got 73 in there, so it's closer to the 80 that we need, and then this one will accumulate enough to start to fill the chest before these will. Okay, 74. So we're getting closer. All right, now the other thing that would help would be for us to speed these up. So we can speed these up with speed modules. Do I have any speed modules? No, I forgot to make the speed modules. Let me see, do I have any in... Let me press L. Let me see if I have any... Yeah, I don't have any speed modules in my logistics network too. All right, so let me pause here real quick, and I'll be right back with some speed modules. Okay, and I'm back. I was having a little difficulty pausing the recording. Sorry about that. Okay, so I've got some speed module 3s that I made. Wink, wink. Just don't ask where the modules came from. Let's just say that I have ways to get things. Okay, so I've got some speed modules now. Unfortunately, I'm already using all my module slots for productivity modules. Okay, so this is where beacons come into play. All right, I've crafted 4 of these beacons. So when you grab a beacon, you can see that it's got a range indicator, and when you get it close to a production machine, it's highlighted with a white bracket. Okay, so that means that the beacon is close enough to that machine to provide its effect. So what is the effect of a beacon? Well, when you first place it down, the effect is nothing. But if you hover over it, you can see it says distribution efficiency 0.5, number of effect receivers are 3. Okay, so the effect receivers are these 3 machines. Because you can see when I hover over this, those are the ones that have the brackets. Those 3 machines are within the range of this beacon. And what the beacon does is the beacon will transmit the effect of speed modules or efficiency modules at a 50% distribution efficiency, let's say, to any machine that's within its range. Okay, and then each beacon can hold 2 modules. So if I put in 2 speed modules, these have a speed of plus 50% each. Okay, so I've loaded in 2. Now you can see energy consumption is plus 70 because I've got a plus 70 energy consumption penalty, and speed is plus 50. Okay, now it's saying speed plus 50 and energy consumption plus 70 because my distribution efficiency is 0.5. Okay, so even though I put in 2 modules, it's only, these machines are only picking up 50% of that effect. So that's the penalty that you get by using beacons, that prevents them from being completely overpowered, right? But now if we look at our crafting speed, we can see that the crafting speed on these is 1.2, which is a plus 20% over the base crafting speed. Okay, now the plus 2 comes from the fact that we have minus 15%. Okay, so we have minus 30% from our productivity modules, and then we have plus 50% from our beacon, which gives us a net of plus 20%. Okay, so if you use 1 beacon, that's great. You can affect up to 3 machines on one side, right? I could also put machines here, 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 and here, and that would greatly increase the effect of this beacon. Okay, so that gives us a little bit more speed. Now we can also add more beacons. So your first inclination might be, well, let's put these all on a line. And then there's 1 beacon in front of each one, and then there's one next to it, right? So now this machine, if you look to where it says number of effect sources, 4, an effect source is essentially a module or a beacon. So in this case, I've got 2 effect sources from these 2 modules, and then I've got 2 effect sources from these 2 beacons. This beacon over here is not hitting it. Okay. Same with this one on the other end. It's 4. Now this one here in the middle, it says number of effect sources is 5, and that's because that is within range of all 3 of these beacons. Okay. It bothers me a little bit that this one now is running at a different speed than these other 2 are. Okay, let's take a look. This is at 80 now, so let's watch what happens. All the uranium's coming out, and then you see that 81st one got left in the chest, and then it went over here to make fuel. Okay, so now we're starting to stockpile some fuel cells there. Okay, now we can improve on this situation slightly if we offset the beacons. So if I take my first beacon and rather than putting it directly in front of the machine, I'm going to shift it to the left by 1 tile. Okay, and now I'm going to place 4. And now let's load those with modules. So I'm just going to control left click. Okay, now this one in the center still has more. But by doing this, you can get more beacons to affect. So now this one is affected by 1, 2, 3 beacons. This one is affected by 4. This one is affected by 1, 2, 3. Okay, and if I made... So this one's got 5. right? 3 beacons plus 2 modules, 4 beacons plus 2 modules, 3 beacons plus 2 modules. So if I made just 2 more beacons, which I will craft right now, if I put 1 more on each end, then these will all be affected by 4 beacons, and that'll give us the maximum amount of speed. So I'm going to copy this. We'll put 1 more on each end. I think we're going to need more power poles. Yep. And the bots will put modules in as well. Just waiting for that to craft. There we go. There's the modules. Okay. So now these, all 3 of these now have 6 effect sources. Okay. And crafting speed of 2.7, which means that instead of now taking 60 seconds, it's going to take a little over 20 seconds for each cycle, including my productivity bonus. Okay, let's take that out. Let's put that there so we can start to get this second machine fully loaded. All right, and now with this faster cycle time, it won't be too long before these are all running and just pumping out uranium like nobody's business. Now, there's one thing that you have to be a little bit careful of when you're just going completely gangbusters with the Kovarex enrichment. You can get to the point where you convert too much of your uranium-238 to 235, and then you'll have plenty of uranium-235, but you won't have enough uranium-238 to make the fuel cells. Ultimately, what you want is a 1:13 ratio between 235 and 238 to keep things running. And I'll explain why here. Let me put a fast inserter on that. There we go. Because now this one is picking up some speed boost as well. Before we get to that, let's take a look at our power consumption. So we can see now the centrifuges are consuming quite a lot of power. The beacons themselves are consuming almost 3 megawatts, and that's just with 6 beacons. All right, so once you start adding beacons with lots of high-level modules, your power consumption can really start to skyrocket. So that's something that you need to keep a close eye on. Now, in our case, I still have plenty of power generation, so it's not really an issue. I can get 160 megawatts from my 2 reactors, plus I have all my solar, so I'm not concerned about running out of power right now. But if you're going for mega base and you start to build up, massive factories that are full of modules and beacons, which is generally what you do when you're building at mega scales, you'll have everything surrounded by beacons. That way you can make your science packs with 7 or 8 factories instead of like 50. It makes a huge difference in the number of buildings that you need to make a large base, or a base with a high output. But you do have to keep an eye on your power consumption. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, the 1:13 ratio. Okay, so to make a fuel cell, you have a 1:19 ratio to make a single fuel cell. You get 10 fuel cells, okay, but in any case, so 10 fuel cells you need 1 uranium and 19 235s. Now, 5 of those spent fuel cells will convert back into uranium-238. Okay, so those 10 fuel cells that you make here will eventually result in 10 spent fuel cells, which will give you back 6 uranium-238s. Okay, so that's where that 1:13 ratio comes from. It's the 19 of this recipe minus the 6 that you get back from the spent fuel cells. So as long as you have a 1 to 13 ratio of uranium-235 to uranium-238, then you can make an unlimited quantity of fuel cells. But like I said, if you keep this Kovarex enrichment running, it's tempting just to add a lot of centrifuges and maximize this process, because now you're finally getting the good stuff that you really want to make your fuel cells. But if you do that, you could end up using up too much of your uranium-238. So what you can do is you can set up a circuit to stop this process once you've hit a 1 to 13 ratio in storage. Okay, so let's do that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an arithmetic combinator, or an arithmetic combinator. I'm not sure what is the proper way. And we will put it, I need to put it within range of a roboport. Okay, I'm going to put it over here. And I'm going to put a roboport down. Right there. Okay, and then I'll take a red wire. I'll connect the output of the roboport to the input of the combinator. And I'm doing that because I want to read the contents of my logistics network so I can see how much of each of these different types of uranium I have on hand. Let's put that back in the second machine. We're getting closer to 80 on that one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the input which is going to be, let's see, 13. Yeah, so I'm going to take uranium-238 and I'm going to divide by uranium-235. And I'm going to output it as, I don't know, let's say R. R for result. Okay. So right now I have no result for R, and that's because I'm trying to divide by 0. Right? So let's, right now I'm going to remove this request. And I'm going to take some of this uranium and I'm going to stick it right there, so that we have something to count. Okay, so now we can see, like in this case, R is 76. Okay, so I'm currently at a 1 to 76 ratio of uranium-235 to uranium-238. That's perfectly safe. We can allow this process to continue going. Okay, so let me put that back in there. There we go. Now there's 80, 81. All right, I'm going to take one out, so it only goes up to 80. There we go. Okay, and then I'll put this request back in. 1. There we go. Okay, so this won't give us a valid output until we've actually got some in storage. Okay, right now it's giving us no output. So we need to protect for that. So let's make a decider combinator. Okay, so I'm going to take the output R, and I'm going to say if R equals 0, well, here's the thing. I want to tell this inserter to only work if R is greater than or equal to 13, or let's say greater than 13. But right now, because there's no uranium in storage, it's going to be 0 because I've got an error. So really what I want is I want something to say if R is equal to 0, then R is 13. Okay, so I'm going to make 2 decider combinators. All right, and I'll put them right here. All right, so one will say if R is equal to 0, then output R or let's use a different one. Output green with the input count. Okay. And then I'll make a constant combinator. I'll put that right here. And I'm going to give this green, I don't know, let's say 20. Or we'll just say 14. And I'll connect that with a green wire. Oh, okay. Now I'm getting our... Ah, okay, good. It's starting to accumulate. Now, why is it not... okay, this isn't running because I have no iron. Okay. I need to put iron into the logistics network. So let's go do that. I need iron plate for the fuel cells, and right now I don't have anywhere where iron plate is being added into the network, but we can do that right here. I'll put a passive provider chest. We'll connect that. And we'll just use that to load, to keep loading 50 iron plates into the logistics network. That way the bots can bring iron plates up there. Actually, I could probably steal the iron plates because I'm using iron plates down here to make the acid, but this will be a little bit easier. Okay, so these are going to get consumed here pretty quickly. Okay, yeah, so now this is outputting a 14 because R is equal to 0. Okay, let me copy this. Now in this case, I want to say if R is not equal to 0, then yeah, see, now I got a problem. Because I want the R to go out. Okay, rather than not equal to 0, let's just say if R is greater than 13, then output a green signal. Okay, and this can just be a 1. Okay, so this is saying if R is equal to 0, output... Yeah, I don't need this. We could say output a green as a 1. And this is saying if R is greater than 13 to output a 1. All right, so anything that's between 0 and 13 will get no green signal. Okay. So now I'll link these two outputs together, and then I'll run these to each of these inserters. Okay, and I'm going to tell these to operate only when the green signal is greater than 0. Okay, and if we zoom in, we can see that there's a little green light. So they all have a green signal, and they will continue to have a green signal until such time that the ratio gets to be too great and we need to start conserving the uranium. Okay, now we could also put a limit here, which is probably a good idea. So let's only make more fuel cells when we've got less than, I don't know, 200. Okay, and I've already got far more than that. All right, let's make it 1,000. Okay, I've got 844. So this will continue to run until I've got 1,000 fuel cells produced. Yeah, we're just waiting on iron plate. Let me increase this so that they bring more. Because what happens is it'll bring the 10 or the 20 that it was asking for, and then it'll sit there and wait for more bots to arrive. But I want it to have a constant supply or close to it. Okay. And then the other thing that we can do, just so we can see that our ratio is good or not, is we can connect this output to this light, and we can tell the light to activate when R is greater than 0, and we'll tell it to use colors. And, oh no, not R, the green signal, sorry. There we go. So that way we'll have a nice green light anytime that we need to run this thing, and we can just take a look, and if we see the green light, then we know that we still have plenty of uranium-238 around that we can use to make more uranium-235. Okay, looks like we've exceeded 80 on this one. Okay, which is good, so it's going to start to accumulate there, and then this one hasn't quite reached that level, but we're doing fine. So now we should be able to see, yeah, so now we can see in a moment, we're getting an actual value for our 5.9K, so we can allow this to run for a very long time. But if you were going to be expanding your base quite a bit and, spending dozens or hundreds of hours in a game, this would eventually come into effect and shut down your Kovarex enrichment process. I've done that before in some of my other series where I've played it long enough that it did get to the point that I had to stop making more uranium-235 so that I had enough uranium-238 on hand. Okay, well, I think that's going to do it for today. Let's take a look at our to-do list. So Kovarex enrichment, I think we can check that one off. We haven't talked about productivity modules too much. What I want to do here is start putting productivity modules throughout the main base here, and we'll get into that probably in the next episode. And then we need to upgrade our rail system, which is still kind of slow. And we'll do the supply train in a more thoughtful manner. Let's see how we're doing on supply and repair packs. Okay, we're doing okay on repair packs. And then when all that's done, I'll talk about mods. There are lots and lots of mods out there, but there are a few that I use on almost any game that's not pure vanilla like this one is. So I'll talk about some of the mods that I like to use so that you can check them out and decide if you want to use them in your games as well. Okay, well, thanks a lot for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.